First speaker, Gareth Edwards, lecturer in sports history or history of sport, and Gareth is going to talk about the politics, context, and the importance of football.
And the first thing I want to look at is from last year, during that month-long barbarous assault by the Israelis on the besieged people of the Gaza Strip. For something like a month, they rained down terror from the skies, killing more than 2,000 people, something like 400 of which, probably more, were children. And all the way through that, it left a series of images that stick with me, and I'm sure you as well, to today. But one particularly stood out for me, and that was the deaths of 4 boys who played football on a beach. It was showered by a gunboat, an Israeli gunboat, off the coast of Gaza. And this stuck with me for a while. I can't remember if Salim said or not. I'm not from London. One of the reasons it's kind of stayed in my head. I'm from Portsmouth on the south coast. And I'm walking down to the beach with my partner, my stepdaughter, who's the same age as one of the boys, Mohammed, that died that day. It just brings out the difference in my day-to-day, our day-to-day existence, and the lived experience of people living in the Gaza Strip. But it was something more than that. And it goes back to those words, that they were playing football on a beach. Playing. And it's that concept of play. If play means anything, it should mean joy and innovation, spontaneity, creativity. It's one of the realms of human life where you kind of withdraw yourself from reality. And yet, still, they were murdered. And if you think about what play is very much this thing that I think play is intimately connected with childhood. We talk about play as a child's work. We say child's play. All of these things. And coupled together, at least speaks to me about innocence. So that stayed in my mind for a long time, that these boys were playing football on a beach. If you rewind another year, you get a very different conception of play. If you look at, if you look at June 2013, Israel is hosting the European Under-21 Championships. This is a football tournament for the bestest and brightest of European talent. And it's a very different idea of what football is. It's not necessarily play anymore. It's football as a sport. It's football as a commodity, as competition. And most importantly for us in this instance, it's football as an exercise in international relations. Because Israel were overjoyed to be awarded this tournament. They were overjoyed because it meant that they were part of the European football family. And they could show it. We hosted this tournament. What was interesting about it was how quickly opposition developed. Almost immediately, more than 50 professional footballers. I don't know how many of you are football fans. I know there are Arsenal fans. Doesn't count. Sorry. Winning the room round, bit by bit. So more than 50 professional footballers signed a letter, and some names you might recognise. Eden Hazard, Abu Dhabi, of Arsenal, yes, there we go, I'll take it all back. Freddie Canute, formerly of West Ham, Jeremy Menez, who plays in France. All of these people signed a letter stating not only their solidarity with the Palestinian people, but calling on UEFA, which is the European football governing body, to withdraw the tournament from Israel. Wasn't the only thing. PSC circulated a petition. The good folks at Philosophy Football did a wonderful documentary about what it was like to play football behind the wall in Palestine. And lastly, but by no means least, there was a letter published in The Guardian, signed by various names that people would recognise. Most notable, most important of which was Archbishop Desmond Tutu, a veteran of the anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa. And this letter, let me just find... Panicking now. This letter not only condemns what it called Israel's cruel and lawless behaviour, but it also lambasted UEFA for showing what it called total insensitivity to the blatant and entrenched discrimination inflicted on Palestinian sportsmen and women. Fantastic letter. What I would say about this, I didn't think that level of opposition existed, that it could be a springboard towards a sporting boycott campaign. So that it did is fantastic. However, at that stage, the protests fell on deaf ears. Michel Platini, the French head of UEFA, said in a wonderfully telling comment at the time, he said, no, Israel will host the competition. And they pushed him and he said, look, I don't do politics, I do football. And so much of what we need to understand about the relationship between sport and politics and how people at the head of sport think about these things is contained within that one very small sentence. I want to spend just a minute thinking why it was important, though, for Israel to be hosting this tournament in the first place. Whenever a mega event, an Olympics or a World Cup, or what, okay, I'll make this up, work with me, okay? Or a mini mega event, like the Under-21 Championships, or like the recent European Games in Baku and Azerbaijan. What attracts governments and states to want to host things? And academics talk about the promise of the P triad. If you're a government and you're looking at hosting one of these, it's the promise of profit, pride, and publicity. That's what you want, that's what you hope to get out of hosting these events. And for Israel, like I said before, it's about being, look, we're part of the European football family. We're a steady democracy. We have the money, the resources, the intelligence, the infrastructure to host one of these events, just like you would in Britain or Spain or wherever. And interestingly, they beat off competition from England, from Wales, from the Czech Republic, and Bulgaria to host this tournament. All countries, by the way, you will have noticed, are actually in Europe. So it's about reaffirming that identity. We're not with these Arab nations here. We are a forward-thinking Western European-style country. And it gives them the opportunity to project an image to the world. This image. And UEFA, in allowing them to host this tournament, whether unwittingly or not, what they've done is normalise Israel through sport. What they've said is, look, we are going to legitimise a state founded on terror, violence and expulsions. We are going to sanitise what you do each and every day. Your attacks on the Palestinians, it doesn't matter because you're one of us. There is a validity to them because they are allowed to host these kind of tournaments. So, hopefully, gives you just an idea of how sport is politically useful for the state of Israel. Okay. That said, sport is also very important for the Palestinians. For a people who are denied on the international stage their nationhood, their states, their national identity, sport becomes a focus, a place in which they can not only express themselves, their identity, not only take great joy and experience entertainment as well, but put themselves into a world community and say, we are the Palestinian people. This is our nation. And I'll give you just one example. I'm going to try and keep to one example for each of these, because otherwise I'll ramble on forever. Give you one example. At the start of this year, Palestine travelled to Australia to play in the Asia Cup. They'd qualified for the first time. Fantastic achievement, absolutely wonderful. Yeah. Nobody expected them to get there, least of all me, but they did. And when they got there, they were greeted as the Palestinian national team. And they were introduced as the Palestinian national team. And they played against other international teams from various nation states around the world. They were, to all intents and purposes, nation state. Yet, about 10 days before Palestine got to Australia, there was a vote in the UN about the status of Palestine, whether to upgrade it to be a proper nation state. Should we go forward with this? Australia voted against. So in an economic sphere, in a social sphere, in a political sphere, they are denied nationhood. And yet in the sporting sphere, they have a national identity. They're treated much like a nation state. All of which is incredible, not least of all because of the desperate situation that Palestinians in general face, in particular regard for this talk, Palestinian sport faces. And I'll talk about that in just a sec. But I want to detour just for a moment and say something, congratulating the Palestinian men's team here. I want to say something about Palestinian women's football as well. Because, if anything, their accomplishments have been more inspiring and greater than the men's. I suppose I should probably try and put it in some kind of context. I am sure that we have all seen one of those horrible right-wing pieces written by some commentator in a newspaper talking about women's oppression in the Middle East, and particularly in Palestine. These turn my stomach. Why? Well, because I don't buy it. I don't buy that this person actually gives a damn about women in Palestine. I don't know, if you wanted to talk to them about childcare or equal pay in this country, they'd run a mile. If you want to do something about women's oppression in Palestine, okay, lift the embargo so that medicine and sanitary products can get in. If you want to do something about women's oppression in Palestine, then what you want to do is you want to put pressure on the Israelis to stop them bombing and killing women in Gaza Strip and the West Bank. If you want to do something about women's oppression in Palestine, I tell you what, don't send the IDF in to go and clobber people around the head when they're demonstrating outside our Aqsa Mosque. That's happened a couple of days ago. So I don't buy this. Right, this becomes, when right-wing people do, I think it's very much a stick with which to beat Palestinian solidarity. That said, it doesn't mean that there aren't rather socially conservative, with a small c, views in Palestinian society. And I advise all of you to do this. When you go home tonight, forget what I said. Look on YouTube and look up the very many interviews that are done with Palestinian women footballers. They are wonderful. But almost all of them talk about growing up, wanting to play football, and being dissuaded or gently nudged away from it by their parents, by their brothers, by the other kids in the street. And I'll give you just one example, taken from a woman that once captained the Palestinian team. Let's make sure I've got the right one. So she's trying to sum up the views. These aren't her views, she's summing up the views of men around her as she was growing up. And she said, men would say, it's a tough game, it's for boys, not for girls, and you should not play this rough and tumble game. You will be like boys if you do. Don't just follow the ball, find a good man to marry and look to the future. And you get this very definite idea. So, and I'm not promised this is, I know there's only one quote, you will find many like that. The important part about this is not that there's sexism in Palestinian society, sexism in every society, but that attitudes are changing. And the reason they're changing is because the women footballers in Palestine never stopped playing. To all intents and purposes, there was no official structured game for women in Palestine before 2003. Yet, by 2009, they were having their first international match against Jordan. 10,000 people turned up to see that match. 6,000 more were locked outside, clinging to various bits of scaffolding, trying to get a look to see what was happening. 2 years later, February the 10th, 2011, February 10th, 2011, they started a Palestinian Women's League. 8,000 people turned up to the very first game. Now there are 12 clubs, 6 in Gaza, 6 in the West Bank. Women's football is the biggest growing sport in Palestine. And if you look at how the PFA, the Palestinian Football Association, have gone about stuff, no longer are there these attitudes of, oh dear, come on now, don't play football, go home, find a man. None of that. They've put more money into women's football. They've put more resources into facilities, training, coaches, referees. They've given more time over in terms of media exposure. And for the very first time, girls' football is on the PE curriculum. It's all because the women of Palestine refuse to stop playing football. And I think if somebody wants to talk about sexism in the Middle East, that's the example you give back to them. Anyway, what I would say is that both the achievements of the men who play football in Palestine and the achievements of the women that play football in Palestine are incredible given the circumstances in which they live. And Jeff will detail Jeff will detail some of these. You're speaking second. I can get away with this. I'll run through them reasonably quickly. But there are all sorts of problems. I spoke about the embargoes earlier. Not only does it affect the real life and death stuff like medicine, but it's the incredibly petty stuff as well. Football shirts don't get into Palestine. Football boots don't get into Palestine. Footballs don't get into Palestine. It's a ridiculous situation. There's a wonderful interview with a Palestinian footballer where he talks about being called into the national team for the first time. He said, I was so excited. Most of the players that play professionally don't have the kind of money that they need to be able to afford proper kit. He said, when I got called up to the Palestinian national team, they said, you get a free pair of boots. I was delighted. And I'm like, right, I'm size whatever, 9 or whatever it is. And he's like, well, no, you don't get to pick. We just have a certain selection of boots, and you get the closest one to you. We haven't got the money to buy kit for everyone all the time. So, well, what if the boots are too big? You stuff socks. What if they're too small? That's the situation. Never mind your £120 pair of boots for your one-off season. There is no money. There is no kit. The embargo hits. And of course, it gets felt in other ways as well. The amount of kind of sporting infrastructure in the country is minimal, to say the least. Pitches are at a premium, pitches with grass on them, as opposed to just concrete pitches, even more so. Okay, all of the things that affect Palestinians on a day-to-day basis, about travel, about being able to go from one place to another, also affect the football team as well. Most famously, I think it was 2009, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, Palestine trying to leave the country to go and play an incredibly important, as a football fan, I think it's incredibly important World Cup qualifying game in Singapore. Every single player, every single one, not one or two, every single player in the squad was denied an exit visa. Israel just said no. Palestine forfeit the match accordingly, get knocked out. These are the kind of things that happen all the time. And there's so little money sloshing about the game that even FIFA have chipped in for giving cash to the Palestinians. I'm assuming knowledge, aren't I? Do you all know who FIFA are? Okay, in case you don't know who FIFA are, or FIFA is, FIFA is a worldwide criminal cartel that specialises in embezzling both private and public money. It also doubles as the head of welfare. FIFA, last year, FIFA gave the Palestinian Football Association €840,000. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. You know, it's not Premier League standard. It's not 5 billion down the back of the sofa. Probably not what you would get to buy my vote if I was in FIFA. But it's a lot of money. But let's put it in the context of the region. In 2013, Maccabi Tel Aviv, the most successful Israeli team of all time, spent €1.1 million on a striker. Ben Tal Hayim, I think. Yeah, Ben Tal Hayim. 1.1 with one transfer of one in one club completely eclipses, of one Israeli club, completely eclipses the entire budget for Palestinian football in one go. That's what we're talking. In terms of football, €840,000. It's peanuts. How am I doing for time? Oh. Right, that's stuff that I was going to leave out. I'm going to put back in here. I didn't know if I had time for this or not, so I'm going to wing this a little bit because I thought I'd have time to do it at the end. One of the other things I want to speak about is the situation inside Israel itself and how Arabs are treated in football generally. Because the situation isn't great. There are a number of Arab players in the league, and they are subject to the kind of racism that you would expect to find more or less all the way through Israeli society as well. However, there is one particular club that stands out as being the most horrendous, the most right-wing, and terrible example of Israeli football fans, and that's Beitar Jerusalem. Beitar were formed in the 1930s, took much of their fan base and early players from the Irgun. They have never fielded an Arab player in their team. Only once have they had one on their books in the 1970s, and he was never allowed to play. There is a section of their fans, their ultras group. I'm going to have to take a little detour. When people talk about ultras, the common misconception is that this is a synonym for hooliganism. It's not quite. Ultras are the most vivacious, loud, passionate group of supporters that a club has. Sometimes it's associated with violence. Sometimes, as with Beitar, or indeed, say, Lazio in Italy, it's associated with incredibly right-wing views. We're talking sort of neo-Nazi views in this case, although there's a difference there between the anti-Arab racism of Beitar and the anti-Semitism of the Lazio ultras. But there are other ultra groups around. The ultras at Celtic, at St. Pauli in Germany, and at Livorno are all left-wing, anti-racist, anti-sexist, anti-homophobic, organised demonstrations against fascists. Fantastic. So we can't tar all of the ultras with the same brush, but there's an ultra group at Beitar called La Familia, and it is run by a man called Guy Israeli. And as the football writer and historian David Goldblatt said, can there be a more everyman name? You know, who are you? I am an Israeli guy. I am Guy Israeli. Well, his day job, if you ever see a picture of him, by the way, he is a unit. You know, you would take a few people to go and protest against him. But he, very hardcore fans, but by his day job happens to be as an accountant. He's rather middle class, actually. And if anyone wants to do a bit of history about the 1930s, about the origins of fascism and where the leadership comes from, you'll find something similar. And I choose my words carefully there. This is not a spurious kind of historical comparison. That'll come in a minute. But deliberately so. Why? Because Beitar have form. They have a track record. In 2009, Beitar signed 2 Muslim players for the first time, both from Chechnya. And at the game, the first game when these 2 players played, La Familia, the Beitar Ultras, unfurled a giant banner which read, Beitar will remain pure forever, with deliberate overtures of National Socialism. These are by far and away the worst example. I don't pretend for a minute that they represent most Israeli fans, but I think that they represent the very worst of Israeli society. And it's important to know about. Got to the point they played a pre-season match, maybe a week ago, was it? Against Charleroi in Belgium, at which point they released some fireworks, let off smoke bombs, did a whole series of racist chants, threw stuff onto the pitch so that the opposition's goalkeeper was eventually knocked out. And now the president of the club saying, I've had enough. I can't cope with the fans anymore. Like a parent in pulling their hair out at this naughty child. I've had enough. But truth of the matter is, actually, the fans have been running the club for ages. When it was rumoured that they would be buying a Muslim player, the fans stormed the building. And this has gone on for a long time. Only now, after many years, because of the fans, at various points, Beitar have been fined, docked points, told they weren't allowed to have fans in the stadium, kind of one-off punishments. Only now has this the deep-seated institutional racism of that football club been brought before any kind of authority. And I think it's a SOP by the Israeli Football Association because of what happened at FIFA, which, funnily enough, I'll come on to. So, I've thrown myself now by adding that bit in. So what we've got a situation in which Israel are desperate to project a certain image on the international stage, one in which they use sport to do just that. We have a situation in which the Palestinians, denied access to all sorts of equipment, facilities, and what have you, are desperately trying to use sport in their own way, and in which both men and women are playing successfully, struggling against the racism of Israeli apartheid. I suppose, really, I'm going to have to say something about FIFA, and then hope that Jeff fills in a few of the details. As long as I haven't missed anything out. Bear with me, folks. Oh, actually, yeah, go on, I'll go back a bit. Knew there was a bit. When you look at all the things that have happened to football and sport in Palestine, I think it's forgivable if you come to if you look at the situation, you come to the conclusion, well, given the horror and the barbarity that afflicts all of Palestinian society, isn't this just a byproduct of that? Isn't it just the case, to use a horrible term, and I apologise to them, isn't sport just collateral damage in the wider conflict against Palestine by Israel? Isn't it almost like unintended? I think the evidence counters that. Not only, if you look at it, over the past few years, Israel have invaded and then occupied for a number of days the Football Association building in Palestine. They had, as soon as the National Stadium was finished in 2008, it became a victim of the 2008-2009 bombing campaign that took place. They rebuilt the National Stadium in Palestine. It was bombed again in 2012. This is deliberately targeted. And they deliberately target players as well. The list of people who have, sportsmen and sportswomen who have been killed by the Israelis is tragically, tear-jerkingly long. and I cannot do justice to all of those who have fallen. But a couple of examples, and I do need two this time. People will be, I'm guessing some people will know who Mahmoud Sarsak is. Sarsak is without doubt the most obvious example of how Israelis have targeted sports people. A talented, young, dynamic midfielder, only 22, he's arrested as he tries to leave Gaza to get to the West Bank for a football match. For 3 years, the Israelis hold him without trial or charge. Eventually, he goes on hunger strike. How he does this, I have no idea. His hunger strike lasts for more than 90 days. And if you put that in perspective, people like Bobby Sands, who went on hunger strike in the 1980s, lasted about 50, 60 days. He went on the hunger strike for 90 days, by which time he became something, I don't want to underestimate it. There was a huge grassroots movement around Mahmoud Sarsak, and it also became something of a cause celebrity. Eric Cantona became involved. Freddie Canute again became. Any Chelsea fans in? Not really. You're safe, you can stay. They're never on. You know, I'm in London, why would there be Chelsea fans here? But Didier Drogba became involved, an ex-Chelsea player. Even, oh my word, Sepp Blatter spoke out for Mahmoud Sarsak. And eventually he comes off his hunger strike and he's released within a month. It's an incredible story. And if anyone ever gets a chance to meet him or talk to him or see him speak, it's phenomenal. You wish he was here instead of me. If you see him, he really truly is an inspiration. But there is another example, and you're going to have to put up with my appalling pronunciations, I'm afraid. A less well-known story revolves around two young players, Jawar Nasser Jawar and Adam Al-Roof. I hope I pronounced those well. Again, these are two young footballers going to check. In this case, the IDF dispense with the pleasantries of mere incarceration. A warning shot is fired as these guys come near. They stop, as you would. As they stop, the IDF release dogs. The dogs attack the guys. As they're lying there, covered in bites and blood, the IDF set up on them. And after they've taken their beating, and they're thinking that that's the end, and they've missed the match, but they'll go home, they both get shot in the feet and in the legs. Deliberately. They knew they were footballers. They are targeting footballers. They are doing this systematically. The question for me, and I think for all of us, is why? And I think it's twofold. One is about going back and denying that sense of national identity that the Palestinians have. It's about saying, no, look, you think you can use football to create your sense of self, to reach out to other people around the world? Well, we won't let you. As simple as that. Interestingly, Mahmoud Sarsak says another thing. He says, do you know why they do it? It's not only that. They just want to get rid of any little semblance of joy that we have in our lives. They just want to take it away, treat us like animals. All of which, when you put it together, I think equals sporting boycott. These are the reasons why we need a sporting boycott. And it's been attempted, and this is where we get to FIFA, and it all becomes a little bit pantomime. Okay, the Palestinians put a motion before the 65th Congress of FIFA, calling for, amongst other things, the expulsion of Israel. At the last minute, it was pulled and never got voted on. Now, this all took place as the corruption scandal around FIFA was breaking, and some people have made comments about, that looks a bit like, is that a coincidence? Is it, have the Americans done the Israelis a favour by arresting these people? I hate to say it, but no. Is Sepp Blatter in cahoots with the Israel? Well, Sepp Blatter was, do you know what? Sepp Blatter went and saw Mahmoud Abbas about 3 months ago And he came out of the meeting, they had a press conference together, and he went, no, I don't want there to be a sporting boycott. This is not a surprise, okay? I think people really thought that the boycott motion would work. Never had a chance, in my opinion. Never had a chance. Why? Two reasons, I think. Oh, look at that, I'm on time. Small round of applause for myself. The thing about, one of the problems with anyone that does campaigning, we all kind of know a little bit about the global economy, we know a little bit about how politics works, maybe we know about the activism, we know that it doesn't matter how many leaflets, how many posters we print out, someone will forget blue tack. All of these things are known to us. Sporting administration completely bypasses us for most of the time. Let me be clear about this. Nobody at the head of any of the sports is interested in politics. Right? There's mass hypocrisy here, there's mass doublethink. These are political actors that, when they want to line their own pockets, they're political as you like. But as soon as a political question comes along, they run in the other direction like they're on fire. And it was ever thus. The lever that we have to change that is a mass international campaign around boycott. Only then can we shift the balance of forces inside these organisations. And I think in this case, South Africa is instructive, and I'll try and wrap it up here. First, it's generally accepted that the start of the sporting boycott campaign around South Africa started in 1959. Actually, there were calls for sporting boycott before that. The first time the South African Table Tennis Federation, which was a whites-only organisation, was expelled from international table tennis in 1955. Right? So these things happened, whether you go 1955 or 1959 as your starting point. South Africa were not expelled from FIFA until 1976. That is 20 years. Why? Because boycott is both an event and a process. And I think if we see it that way, then I don't think you need to be disheartened about what happened at FIFA. You still need to explain it and think about it. But I think what it means is it's just another step in the direction of achieving boycott. And the very next step for us is, of course, September the 6th in Cardiff at the Wales-Israel match. As big a demonstration as humanly possible there is the next step in the boycott campaign, both here and internationally. And I'll leave you just with this thought. I was very, very privileged to not only meet but interview Mahmoud Sassak a little over a year ago. And during the course of the interview, he said to me, "Football is my weapon. Should be ours too." See you in Cardiff. Cheers.
A couple of things. This has been hosted by West London Palestine Solidarity Campaign. PS is part of a national organisation. It's very simple. We campaign for freedom, justice and equality for Palestinians. That's it. We try and do that all year round and all the time. And we do it in a whole number of ways, either through public meetings or through stalls or through showing films or through supporting actions, and also being involved, individual members being involved in various BDS campaigns.